Hi everyone, Pastor Wagner again. Welcome to my weekly video blog. This morning I want to talk about when it's okay or if it's okay for a Christian to lie. Now, as we know, the Bible says, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor." We're not supposed to lie one to another. That's a pretty standard moral that almost every Christian, I'm sure, would agree with. But is there ever a time when it's okay to lie? Now, I'm not trying to promote situational ethics here or moral relativism or anything like that, but I want to show you some things from the scriptures here and that might surprise you if you've never heard it before. In cases where human life is at stake, God's law is set up in a hierarchy to where if two of God's laws come into conflict together, you have to choose the higher law. So if it's a matter of saving life or if it's a matter of lying or some other sin, you have to choose the higher. So you'd be absolutely wrong, for instance, if you were a German during World War II or prior to that, and you were hiding Jews and some of the Gestapo came to your house and said, "Do you have any Jews?" And you'd say, well, you're thinking to yourself, "I'm a Christian, I can't lie." And you say, "Well, yeah, I do, they're hiding in my bedroom." And then they go off and they execute them. You'd be culpable for their death and for their murder because you disclosed their location. In that case, it would be okay to lie, and I will show you biblical and scriptural examples of that momentarily. So the first one that I want to go to is in the book of Exodus. It was the Hebrew midwives, as you recall, when the baby Moses would have been killed had the midwives listened to the commandment of the king. Let's read it here in Exodus 1, starting in verse 15. And it says, "And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, When you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then shall she live. Then she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men, children alive." You see that? They just disobeyed the order of the government. They disobeyed the king. Can you imagine that? "And the king of Egypt called for the midwives, and said unto them, Why have ye done this thing, and have saved the children alive?" Why didn't you obey the government? This is a case of where we ought to obey God rather than men. And listen to what the Hebrew midwives do. Do they fess up to what they did? Do they admit it so that the king can have them executed? What do they say? "And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them." That's a bald-faced lie. They're saying, "Oh, these Hebrew women, they gave birth before we could even get there. We didn't have time to kill the kids." "Therefore God dwelt..." Now listen to this. Listen to verse 20. They just lied to the government. They just lied to the king. "Therefore God got angry with them and punished them." Is that what it says? No. Look at verse 20. "Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very great. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses." God dealt well with the midwives because they lied. They lied through their teeth, absolutely lied to the government to protect human life. And God dealt well with them, and he even made them houses. So anybody that says it's always wrong to lie no matter what, even if it's a matter of saving somebody else's life, is wrong. Just flat out wrong. God blessed. This is what you call a God-blessed lie. God blessed somebody for lying. This is not an isolated incident, though. If you look over in the book of Joshua, whenever Joshua led Israel into the promised land, one of their first stops was the city of Jericho, and he sent spies into the city of Jericho to scoop it out and to see what it was like. And we read there in Joshua 2, "And Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, Go view the land, even Jericho. And when they went and came, into an harlot's house named Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country. And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out the country. And the woman took the 2 men and hid them, and said thus, There came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. Liar. She's flat out lying to the government again. And it came to pass about the time of shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not. I know not. Old word for know. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. So not only does she lie, she makes up a story and said, hey, they took off. Go get them. Go, if you run really fast, you can probably catch up with them and catch up with them down the road. So she's just lying through her teeth, totally lying. Verse 6, but she had brought them up to the roof of the house and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan unto the fords, and as soon as they which pursued after them were gone, they shut the gate. There Rahab lied to the government. Now, is she noted in Scripture for being a wicked woman? Far from it. She was preserved whenever Israel went in and destroyed Jericho. She was the only one, her and her family were preserved because she kept the spies. She lied. And if that's not enough for you, you can go over there and you can look in Hebrews chapter 11 in the New Testament, and this chapter details the heroes of faith back there in the Old Testament. And one of those heroes of faith was Rahab, the harlot who lied. If you look in Hebrews 11 and verse 31, by faith the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not when she had received the spies with peace. She is counted a woman of faith in the chapter of the heroes of faith for lying to the government to preserve and to save innocent life. And furthermore, just to show you this principle, the Son of God, Jesus Christ himself, upheld this very principle in Matthew 12. Actually, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this account is found, but we're going to look in Matthew 12. Matthew 12, 1 through 5. Jesus and his disciples were going through the fields, and his disciples were hungry, and they started to pluck corn. Let's read it. Matthew 5 and verse 12, or Matthew 12 and verse 1, pardon me. At that time Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were an hungered, and began to pluck the ears of corn and to eat. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto him, Behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath day. These Pharisees are upset. The disciples are plucking corn. It's not lawful. According to the letter of the law, you couldn't pluck corn. You couldn't do any work to get any food. You had to do that the day before. Pharisees say, Your disciples are breaking the law. But he said unto them, Have ye not read what David did when he was an hungered, and they that were with him? How they entered into the house of God, and did eat the showbread which was not lawful for them to eat, neither for them which were with him, but only for the priest. Or have ye not read in the law how that on the Sabbath days the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath, and are blameless? Jesus says life comes above the Sabbath. The disciples are hungry. They're in need of sustenance to continue to preserve their own lives. And Jesus says that trumps the Sabbath command. See, God's laws are set up in a hierarchy. And if it comes to obeying the Sabbath law, keeping the letter, or preserving life because you're hungry, you're going to starve or something like that, then Jesus says that trumps it. And he gives the example of King David. King David and his men were fleeing from his enemies. They come to Abiathar, to the house of God, to the priest, and ask him if he has anything to eat. And he says, and the priest says, no, all we have to eat is the showbread, and technically that's not lawful for anybody to eat but the priest. But the priest gave it to David and to his men to preserve their lives. They broke the commandment to eat the showbread. Nobody was allowed to do that but the priest. And Jesus cites this as an example to show that God's law is set up in a hierarchy, and preserving life always comes first. So, is it ever okay to lie? Yes, it is. If you have to lie to preserve somebody's life, then you go ahead and lie. If the preacher's hiding out in your house, if persecution comes and the preacher's hiding out in your house, and the authorities come looking for him, you tell them, oh, he went out the other way. Haven't seen the guy. You know what? I hate that guy. He's telling lies. He preaches lies. I wouldn't house him in my house if I had to. Just, there's nothing wrong in that case to save life, to lie. And Rahab and the Hebrew midwives, and there's many other examples in the scriptures too. You go through the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel and look at all the times that people lied under David and other people to preserve life. So anyway, I hope that helps to clear up some things for you. This is a very important concept, especially in the day and age that we live. You never know. So anyway, your conscience can be clear. It's important to instruct your conscience to guide your heart in the way. So make sure that your conscience is clear before you do something like that, but just know that before God, that is not only permissible, it's the right thing to do. Thanks, and I'll see you again next week. Have a good week.